It's time for FAMU season in review. There was a lot of pressure on James Colzie going into his first year. He didn't quite live up to those expectations. And because of that, I think it's even more pressure on year two. Oh, yeah. It's locked on HBCU. Play my music.
You are Locked On HBCU, your daily podcast covering HBCU sports. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's going on, family? Welcome back to another episode of the Locked On HBCU podcast, your number one daily one-stop shop for everything HBCU athletics, Monday through Friday. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. And now, of course, Sam Darian Gray, a.k.a. the Mouth of the South, Texas Southern alum and former TSU Herald Sports editor and current contributing writer at USA Today's Saints Wire. Thank you for going on this journey with me. Make a Locked On HBCU your first listen of the day every day. And remember, just because the mic cuts off does not mean that the journey is over. It just means it's time to follow me on Twitter at South Exclusives. Starts with an S and ends with an S. Today's episode is brought to you by Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use the code Locked On College to get $20 off your first purchase. It's all about FAMU. It's our season in review for the Rattlers. We'll wrap up with the stars of the FAMU season, but the first two segments are all about new head coach James Colzie. In segment one, we'll take a look at his first year. In segment two, we'll take a look at his upcoming second year. So we like going in chronological order, but let's kick it off with year one. I think that this was a real shock for some FAMU fans. And I only say some because I can't act like I've talked to all of them. I can't even act like I've talked to the majority. But the most vocal of FAMU fans that I've seen on social media when they're not interacting with me, the most vocal FAMU fans that I've seen in my own comments when they were interacting with me, I think that the reaction, or excuse me, the result that you saw in 2024 was probably a shock for those fans, because the vocal FAMU fan, they had a certain level of expectation that stems all the way back to the hiring of Colzie. It stems all the way back to, I would say, not the growing or not the genesis, but once we began to know on the outside that there was a split between Tiffany Dawn Sykes and the FAMU decision makers, the FAMU booster, the FAMU fan base, once we started realizing there was a kind of a fracture there, that all happened during the coaching search. The coaching search is really the catalyst for how I view a lot of this, because if you're looking at my expectations versus FAMU fans' expectations versus the SWAC expectations, I think you're looking at three completely different points of views. You're looking at three completely different points of views. What ended up being true? What ended up being correct? I think that if you would have put me on the spot, I would have guessed that this happened. I would think that they would have a type of year that they had, because the truth of the matter is, it's not like FAMU was garbage. FAMU's loss to Mississippi Valley State, in my opinion, distorts how the rest of their season is viewed, because they have some quality wins on their resume. They have some truly quality wins on their resume, but unfortunately for them, they also lost to Mississippi Valley State. And when you lose to Mississippi Valley State, yeah, that tends to make people think that you were a little bit worse, especially when you weren't your dominant self. See, FAMU steps in with these expectations of a returning championship team. Instead, they look like a really good team at times, or a team approaching the really good tier. That's probably the more appropriate description of who they were in 2024. They were a team consistently approaching the really good tier, because they weren't dominating teams. We're used to them dominating the year prior, right? Like, I think in general, the idea that FAMU was going to run it back was always dangerous. It was always reckless. I knew that at the time. I said that at the time. I got backlash for it at the time. Does the result of 2024 give me vindication? No. But what it does is, I guess in a way it does give me vindication, but I don't feel vindicated, if that makes sense. I think that some people were like, okay, If they go back and listen to what I said, they'll say he was being reasonable. Because I always felt like I was just being reasonable. I didn't predict anything. I said FAMU has too many new pieces. I don't know what they'll be. That was the appropriate way to look at it. But instead, I think the expectations of FAMU fans was that, hey, we're going to run it back and we're going to win another championship. That's why we must hire in-house. It's the reason that I questioned the Colzie hiring after the season to see what's the temperature. And the temperature seemed pretty moderate. I think that wasn't a angry fan base. That wasn't a stubborn fan base, at least the ones that interacted with me. Instead, it was one that says, look, it didn't go that way this year. It didn't go that way this year. And I think that we have to be a tad bit, I would say we have to be a tad bit cautious on how we judge this moving forward. But that's segment 2. Right now, FAMU was supposed to falter because they lost Willie Simmons. Even if they would have retained all of the talent that FAMU fans think they retained, which they didn't, but if they did retain that, you still had to go from a really good coach to James Colzie, which in no disrespect, he has to prove what type of coach he is. James Colzie has to prove what type of coach he is. There is a reason that after only a year away from FAMU, Willie Simmons is already the Florida International head coach. There's a reason that he is now coaching on the FBS level because he is a really good coach. And I don't care what kind of talent you think you retain. When you lose a coach of his caliber, you're going to take a step down. But then let's get to the talent that they didn't retain because you lost your quarterback. You lost both of your top linebackers, arguably the best linebacking duo in the conference, if not black college football. You lose Terrell Jennings at running back who made it to the league. You lose your best edge rusher. You lose your top 2 wide receivers. You lose your best interior piece. Like, you lose a lot of pieces on this team and you lose your head coach. You went 5-3. I think that is a solid year for your first year without a lot of pieces. And when you think about the timing in which you lost them, FAMU went 5-3, but one of those 3 losses was to Prairie View A&M. They can write that one off because, hey, Daniel Richardson got hurt, this, that, and the third. Okay, cool. I allow those to be written off. I still don't like that loss. I still don't like the way that they performed. I still don't like how they operated with a lot of aspects of that offense. That was a consistent plan or consistent issue throughout the majority of the season. But then you lost to Mississippi Valley State and you had your quarterback. And that was the one where it felt bad. And you lost at Bragg. That Mississippi Valley State game changes how we look at FAMU season altogether. If you lose to Alabama State, Jackson State, and Prairie View, then maybe we're sitting here saying, okay, James Colzie just has to keep building in year 2. But because you lost to Mississippi Valley State, it's like, man, that season wasn't really good by FAMU. Those games that they won, they beat South Carolina State. They beat Alabama State. They beat Southern. So you beat one half of the Celebration Bowl representatives. You beat one half of the SWAC championship representatives. You beat another top team that is in your division in Alabama State. You had quality wins on your resume, but you lost to Mississippi Valley State. And when that happens, all of the good gets forgotten. South Carolina State wasn't the same team that they were at the beginning of the season. Is that true? Yes. But had you not lost to Mississippi Valley State, you probably still wear it as a badge of honor. You probably still wear it as a badge of honor. You know, like, Southern wasn't really all that anyway. I'm not going to sit here and deny it. But if you don't lose to Mississippi Valley State, you probably still say I beat one half of the SWAC representatives. That is the way that one loss can shape your entire season. And typically those type of losses come in rivalry games, losing in the Bayou Classic, losing in the State Fair Classic, the Florida Classic, the Labor Day Classic, right? Like losing in those type of games, the Magic City Classic. You lose those type of games, the way your season is looked at is shaped different because those games weigh more. But a loss like that weighs equally as heavy as a rivalry game, in my opinion. And I'll tell you something that outside of expectations, because this was the expectation segment, you also just didn't run the ball enough. We saw what happened when play calling changed. Oh, we can run the ball with our talented stable of running backs that I knew existed from the beginning, but the offensive coordinator didn't. The offensive coordinator didn't want to run the ball enough. Once you change play callers, now you go and you say, oh, we can run the ball. We can use Somerset. We can use Dean, right? Like we can use these players. I think that from a coaching standpoint, that was malpractice. I think it was terrible coaching. It's the reason why, though you went down a running back against Prairie View A&M, I didn't sit there and give them no pass, right? Like, I don't remember who it was. If it was Franklin Somerset or Dean, but you had two more who I knew were more than capable. That's the way that I look at it, man. But overall, in general, you had three sets of expectations for FAMU going into last year. You had mine, which is we should sit back and realize they lost a bunch of talent. We don't know what they're going to be, how quickly they're going to come together. And most importantly, they lost their head coach, who is a great head coach. We should sit back and wonder, let's be a little bit more hesitant. Let's be cautious. And you have the FAMU, but we got all this talent. We're going to run it back. That was reckless. And I think that being the spearhead of the head coaching search was extremely reckless. I'll die on that hill, but I think that's already been proven, in my opinion. I still wish Colzie the best of luck in year 2. We'll get to that in a second. And then you had the SWAC opinion, which is, I think they were projected to finish second. Like, I think they were finished second, right behind Alabama State, if I'm not mistaken. At lowest 3, but I think they were projected to be second. So, in general, this year didn't go the way that many expected, but it went the way that some. Just depends on how you looked at it. 5-3 is not a bad year, though. I think it's a solid year for James Colzie. However, it wasn't what people were looking for, and they were looking for a high level of success. Because he didn't achieve that, I think there's going to be pressure on year 2, especially with that loss to Mississippi Valley State. Let's look at the pressure that's on him in year 2 as we continue with Locked On HBCU. Today's episode is brought to you by Game Time. And Game Time is the only place I go for any of my tickets. Kendrick and SZA coming to town, I went to Game Time. Monday Night Raw coming to town, I went to Game Time. Right? Like, if I want to go see the Mavericks, whenever the Timberwolves or the Pelicans or the Grizzlies come to town, I go to Game Time. It doesn't matter if I want to go to a concert, like I said, if I want to go to an athletic event, like I said, if I want to go to a theater play, I go to Game Time. I don't think it's complicated. You name an event. Yep, I went to Game Time. You name one, I went to Game Time. Because they allowed me to see my vision, my view of the stage or the arena or the court, the field, whatever it may be. They allowed me to see the view of that from my seat. They give me all-in pricing, so I don't have to worry about hidden fees sneaking up on me at checkout. You ever been like, well, you know what? I don't even feel like doing it nowhere else, or I don't feel like doing this at all anymore because it's not what I signed up for. If they say $79, they mean $79. But in order for you to know I'm not telling a lie, go to Game Time, download the app, create an account, use the code LOCKEDONCollege, and get $20 off your first purchase. As we continue rolling on today's episode of Locked On HBCU, I appreciate you for making this your first listen of the day every day. For your second listen, make sure you're checking out Locked On College Football. The college football playoffs are coming to a close, so you want to make sure that you have the most comprehensive knowledge of not only the season, but the upcoming game between Notre Dame and Ohio State. So go to Locked On College Football, hosted by Spencer McLaughlin, today. Now, I want to go into year 2. We looked at year 1. And we recapped it. Now I want to preview year 2. This is the third segment, so to speak. This is segment 2, but this is the one that is a free space. We do stars, expectations, free space. My free space is looking at the pressure that Colzie is under in year 2. Many people don't acknowledge the amount of pressure that was placed on James Colzie in year 1. Imagine, FAMU wins their first ever Celebration Bowl. So it's not like you won 10 of these things back to back to back to back. You win your first ever Celebration Bowl. Your head coach leaves. Your quarterback graduates. You have all of these moving pieces that people act like didn't happen. But let's just say you win your first ever Celebration Bowl, and now you're inserted as the head coach. That is a large amount of pressure, and people are expecting you to do it again. People are expecting you to do it again. That is a large amount of pressure that I don't think we really understood. Or I don't think we spoke about. I think it was under-discussed. I think it was understood, but it was under-discussed. It's kind of like Tremaine Jackson, who's now the head coach at Prairie View. In his first year, there was a certain standard at Valdosta, and he didn't live up to it. And because he didn't live up to it, people were calling for his job. People were calling for Tremaine Jackson's job after the first year because he didn't live up to the Valdosta standard. I kind of feel like that's what was looked at FAMU. Not saying FAMU doesn't have a standard, but it wasn't Celebration Bowl or bust. That was the first time you ever got there, let alone won it. But that's what it was treated. Hey, you got to make the Celebration Bowl. That's why we got you. Being told we're hiring you because you give us the best chance to win a Super Bowl or, excuse me, a Celebration Bowl. Like, yes, that's why you're supposed to hire somebody, not because they're supposed to come and do it year one, though. Not because they're supposed to do it year one. That's a large amount of pressure. So when you don't live up to it, and then you lose to Mississippi Valley State, and people looking at your first year like, yeah, I don't know. It's looking funny under the light. The pressure is now on you to deliver in year two. Am I jaded? Possibly. I think I'm possibly jaded by the fact that there have been so many head coaches that were fired after just 2 years. Would that happen to Colzie? I can't say with my chest whether it would or would not happen, but I can say that I'm seeing other guys, and it's like, all right, man, you get 2 years and we moving on. And with the pressure that was on them, the reason they hired him, this feels like the type of situation to where 2 years is all you get. And if you have a 5-3 season again, no, you're not building no progress. You're not building nothing, right? Like, do I think that's a fair way to judge it? No, I don't. I think that you should have approached this with tapered expectations. I think you should have approached this with patience. But I don't feel like that's how it was approached. So I'm not an idealist. I'm gonna be honest with you. I don't really think that's who I am. I think I used to be. But as I've grown up, I'm less and less of an idealist every day. Some could even say I'm a pessimist. Unfortunately, I don't think I am, but I've been told I was by a close friend of mine. In an ideal situation, that's not how you should judge him. That's not how you should do this. But you also, in an ideal situation, shouldn't have said that he was going to be your head coach because he could get you a Celebration Bowl year one. So we're not living in utopia. We're not living in an ideal world. We're living in the real world. And in the real world, there was real world expectations that were placed on James Colzie. He didn't live up to them in year one. Not only did he not live up to them, that loss to Mississippi Valley State, as I stated multiple times in segment one, it was a season shifter, a conversation shift, a narrative shifter. Like, it just made everything look worse. So because everything looked worse, now we got to go into year two saying, what are you going to be? Oh, you gonna be bad again? Like, but that's what the conversations I think will be as we get closer. That's what I feel like. But FAMU felt like a lost program last year. A lot of that had to do with the preseason chatter and what actually came to be, and not really what was actually put on the field. When I realized that FAMU was 5-3, I was surprised. I thought for sure that they were 4-5. I thought for sure they had a losing record. I thought for sure they were like Prairie View. But then I looked 5-3. So I thought they were 4-4. That's what I thought they were. Excuse me. I thought that they would be a 500 team within the conference. I was shocked to see that. There's a difference between perception and reality, but a lot of times perception is all that really gets accounted for. Right? Like, if I feel this way about you for long enough, it doesn't matter what you actually are. This is what I feel about you, and that's who you are to me. That's why perception and reality are separate, but they're very, very close. They're very close. And depending on who is perceiving you what kind of way, it will impact your reality. Right? Like, let's say I'm a decision maker. And I'm looking at the Mississippi Valley State game. And I'm like, oh, we kind of thought you might lose one you weren't supposed to, but not that one. So now I'm looking at you side-eyed. Everything you're doing is looked at side-eyed now. And now you have another average season, but average feels bad to me. Well, I can fire you because I'm the decision maker. Perception can be disregarded depending on who it is. Darian, the mouth of the South. I mean, I guess me and my perception of James Colzie is probably irrelevant to many because it doesn't impact anything. I appreciate you for, if you think that my perception of him is important. That's why you come and check me out. But if I was in a situation, I'm giving Colzie a break because this is the first year that he's actually going to be able to go get his guys. This is the first year he's going to be able to actually set his own foundation. I mentioned this earlier. James Colzie wasn't hired until late January. I think late January, maybe early February, but I think it was late January, like right before National Signing Day. Let's see. Um, Yeah, it wasn't until late January. So now I think he's going to get a real offseason of being able to implement his his offense, like all of his strategies. He's going to be able to recruit his own high school players. He's going to be able to hit the portal effectively. I think that there's a lot of things that we should give him time for. The problem is he's in his first true year, and I think he's going to have, but he's in his second year. But James Colzie is entering his first true year, right? Like when I say true year, I mean being able to do all of the things that the coaches is supposed to do in the offseason. But he's going into year 2 with the pressures of being on year 3. That's what it feels like. It feels like James Colzie is under the pressure to deliver immediately, when I personally believe this is the beginning of him setting a foundation. If FAMU is patient with him, maybe give him another year after this, regardless of what happens, you can truly see who James Colzie is. I've never once critiqued James Colzie to be a bad coach. I've never called him a good coach. I said he's someone who needs to prove himself. But in order to prove himself, you have to give him the true opportunity to do that. The true opportunity to prove yourself comes with everything at your well, I want to say disorder so much. At your basically at the fingertips. I wish I knew what the cliche was. But James Colzie. A lot of pressure in year 2. A lot of pressure. I can't wait to see what it turns out to be, though. I think FAMU is positioned to be a solid team, good area, good reputation, good recruiting, good marketing. See if they can be a good team through all of that. Now, as you push forward, what about the stars? Who made FAMU who they were in 2024? I got 1, 2, 3, 6 guys, 7 guys. I want to make sure I give them all to you at varying displays of how much I talk about them as we continue to wrap up today's episode of Locked On HBCU. After the holiday hustle, there's nothing like giving your home a little TLC. I always find that decluttering and refreshing my space helps me get back into a routine. I can't even think straight when everything's all messy around me, right? So whether you're tidying up, clearing out, or just want to give your space a new look for the start of the year, Wayfair has everything you need all within your budget. There's something for every style in every home, no matter what your space is or your budget is. And my personal favorite is the free, hassle-free, right? So free and hassle-free delivery, even for the larger items. I don't have to worry about all that stress. I don't have to worry about all that extra dollars. Just go ahead and get it from Wayfair and bring it to my house. Easy peasy. So give your home the refresh it needs from Wayfair. Head to wayfair.com right now. That's WAYFAIR.com. Wayfair, every style, every home. As we're wrapping up today's episode of Locked On HBCU, I appreciate you for making this your first listen of the day every day, making it all the way to segment 3. And I thank you 2 times for that. Thank you. Thank you. I want to go through the stars that made FAMU who they were. And I have a couple of linemen that I'm not going to get into with too much depth, but Charles Davis and Ashton Grable. Both of these players are first team all SWAC. Both of these players helped Daniel Richardson, who is going to be the next name that I call, be able to perform. I thought that Richardson did a lot of good things, but you had a good amount of protection, and at times it allowed him to pick apart defenses. At times it allowed for, I would say most times, I thought Daniel Richardson was really good. I thought the passing attack was actually pretty solid, but it allowed for the running game when they actually used it more often in the end of the season to really kick into gear. That's about those big guys up front. But let's go to Daniel Richardson. Daniel Richardson, the biggest trait about him, I don't even get into numbers, but the biggest trait about him was his poise in the pocket. And his poise wasn't just, I'm standing back there going through my reads. It was sometimes people got on me and I shrug them off, right? Like that was my favorite trait. It seemed like he was so difficult to bring down. And I remember that Norfolk State game, crystal clear. I remember the Norfolk game, crystal clear. There was multiple times when you should have had him down in the backfield. And I think that they would have won the game if they would have took him down 2 more times, because they were critical moments. And it's like, you got to make that sack. But Daniel Richardson was like a magician with the way that he was able to get out of tackles, the way that he was able to see pressure and elude it Sometimes they just shrugged off him. Sometimes it was, I'm going to step up and elude. I thought Richardson was really good at the quarterback position this year, in my opinion. And then you go Jamari Gassett. And with Gassett, of everybody who had to rise to the occasion because someone in front of them was gone, whether that's to the portal or that's to the draft, lack of eligibility, whatever that was, Jamari Gassett, as he said, no, I think it's Gassett. Jamari Gassett, to me, performed the best. He was the lead receiver. He was an all-conference player. He was a guy who genuinely stepped up and rose to the occasion and was a good player. He opened up the season with 110 yards. He had another 100-yard game in there. I thought personally, this was a guy who I wanted to know what he could be. Everybody had high hopes for him, and he delivered on a lot of those high hopes. He ended up ending the season with 737 yards. Then the last guy, or excuse me, that's the last offensive guy that I wanted to break down. I got 4 of those. Then you got TJ Huggins. TJ Huggins led the team with 3 interceptions, 7 pass breakups. Both of those were the best on FAMU. In addition to that, his 10 plays on the ball with the ball in the air, whether that was the 3 interceptions or 7 pass breakups, they were good for the best in the conference per game. He only played in 9 matchups, so his 10 total pass plays on ball, right? Pass defense. Let's just say that pass defense, because that's what the term is. But his 10 ended up being 1.11 pass defense per game. The next closest person was 1 even, but they played the whole 12-game slot, so they ended up having more raw numbers, but you break it down on a per-game basis. They ended up going to TJ Huggins. And lastly, Kendall Bohler. I knew I had 7. I was like, man, I'm tripping right now. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. 2, 4, 7. Anyway, Kendall Bohler, he was locking stuff down on the outside. Kendall Bohler was locked down on the outside. His stats don't look the greatest, but when you're a lockdown corner, sometimes that's the case. Sometimes people stay away from you. He ended up having just 1 interception on the season. He had 4 pass breakups. That was good for second in the on FAMU. But in general, it wasn't like he was super productive. I just think that he was a really good corner. Ended up getting second team all conference. Those offensive linemen I named at the beginning, the only first team all SWAC players that the Rattlers had. I think Richardson played well. He wasn't a first team or second team all conference player, but I thought that he played well in general. And then the last name that I did want to pull up is James Ash, who was a second team all SWAC player. 3.5 tackles for a loss, 2.5 sacks. He was a disruptive force in the middle. Those numbers don't jump off the screen, but at the same time, you understand that the interior can be a little bit difficult to judge based off of a box score. You would say that for most positions. It's especially true for them. But in general, James Ash, second team all conference. I thought Kendall Bohler led this defense, even though the stats weren't great. And I thought that Daniel Richardson played really well. If there was 3, if there was 3 all SWAC teams like they do in the MEAC, sometimes that would have probably went to him. You take the all conference out of it and take the achievement out of it, and you just watch him play. Daniel Richardson was a good football player, and I can't wait to see him at the HBCU Legacy Bowl. But that was our FAMU season in review. I had a lot of fun. I've been waiting to do this. This was very exciting to me. I knew the kind of path that I was going on. So I appreciate you for checking this out. We'll be back tomorrow. In the meantime, in between time, until the next time that we hear each other, family, take care, stay blessed. Peace.